Hi everyone, welcome to the sixth lesson for topic 4.3 Networks and Decision Mathematics. In the previous lesson, we have learned how to find out the critical path and also the minimum completion time for a project. And for individual tasks, we also know how to find the EST, the LST, and also the flood time. Alright, so in all the example that we did previously, you are given the network diagram, you are given the project network itself, and you try to do analysis. So for today's session, we are going to look at the part where when you are given the information, how are you going to use the information and construct the table by yourself? Then after that, by using the network, then you'll be able to do the same analysis like the previous one. So this is going to be a shorter one compared to the previous one. I guess it will be easier as well because it's about constructing a network. Alright, so let's start with the content. Alright, so some terminology for you before we move on constructing a project network. Alright, so first thing previously, the network diagram that we are having is called as a project network, right? So in this lesson, you will be seeing something which is called as an activity table. So in the table, you will get all the information that you need for you to construct a project network. Alright, so you will see one example when we move on to the example part. Okay, so another words is you will need to know what is that meant by an immediate predecessor. Immediate predecessor. Alright, so an immediate predecessor to an activity is the activity that must be completed before the next activity can be commenced. So for example, if let's say you are having like task A, then after that, after task A is completed, then you continue with task B. Okay, so which means if let's say you have something like this, so task A, then after task A continue, then you continue with B. So which means A is the immediate predecessor for B. So which means that you must make sure that A must be completed first before B can be commenced. Alright, so that's the idea. So immediate predecessor, what comes before the task? Alright, so these are some some basic connections that you will need to know when you are trying to constructing a project network. So the first one is that you have one task that having one immediate predecessor. So for example, event B is preceded by A, so which means that A comes before B. Alright, so A is the immediate predecessor for event B. So in this case, which means A comes first, right? So we will need to have a vertices that indicate the starting point. Alright, so this is our starting checkpoint. Then after that, we will continue with, so A comes before B, so that's why we have A here, and don't forget our arrow. Okay, then after you complete A, then you reach another checkpoint, right? So when you complete A, then only you can start B. So that's why from there, then you continue with task B. Alright, so this is how you draw. If let's say event B is preceded by A, so A comes before B, or A is the immediate predecessor for B. Okay, so now we'll be looking at the situation where events B and C are preceded by A. So which means in this case, then so A comes before B and C. Once A is completed, you can now commence events B and C. So that's why same thing, we have one node to indicate our starting. Alright, so from that, then we start our task A. Okay, so when A finish, so at this checkpoint, when A is completed, now B and C can start. So they are simultaneous tasks, right? So that's why you have one task that start at B and another task can start also, which is C. So this is what's that meant by events B and C are preceded by A. So A comes before B and C. A finish, then B and C can be commenced. Okay, so the third type, so event D is preceded by A, B, C. Okay, so in this case, in other words, A, B, C is the immediate predecessor for event D. So which means you must make sure that the task A, B, and C finish, then only you can commence event D. So which means in this case, same thing, but now you will be having the situation where you have the task for A. So maybe you can try to do it like this. Okay, so you have task A. Alright, then after that, another one you have task B. And then another one you have task C. Okay, so when these three events is completed, then only you can start task D. Alright, so this is how you draw it. Okay, so try to understand the idea what is that meant by predecessor, then how should you draw your node. Then basically everything just come in common sense. Alright, so these are something to note before we move on to the example on constructing it. Okay, so the first one, we use vertices to represent the checkpoint of the start and the completion of the project. All right, so which means that this is the checkpoint for us to start, then you start task A, then upon finishing task A, then you have the checkpoint to end this, right? So, and then this checkpoint is also where you start the project D here. Okay, so we use edges to represent tasks. All right, so in this case, so you can see task A, task B, task C. So the task is on the edges as the weight. So later we'll need to put in the length of time also, the duration that you need. Okay, so what we'll try to do is when we first started to construct a network, then you will start with looking for any activities that do not have any predecessor. Okay, so the event that do not have any predecessor, then which mean that they will be the initial activity or the starting activity. So activities that do not have any predecessor, in another words, which mean that there's no activity come before this activity, right? So this activity will be where you start. Alright, okay, so remember those ideas, then now we'll be looking at 3 different examples, then hopefully from the process, then you get an idea for how to draw it by yourself. Alright, example 1. So construct a network for a project consisting of activities A to H listed below. Okay, so in this table, they are given you in a way where they try to give you what is the order that how these activities are conducted following the sequence. Alright, so later in example 2, we'll be looking at the situation where this is normally the table that will be given. So they just give you what is the immediate predecessor, then you need to understand what is that mean, then you try to create the network. All right, so let's try to look at the easy one, the number 1 first. Okay, so when we start to draw a network, then what we try to do is, you remember when you try to find out your EST, your LST, and your critical path, right? There will be always the first starting vertices, the checkpoint where you start and you write 0, 0 inside. Am I right? So that's going to be the same thing here. So when we try to construct a network, then we'll start with the starting vertices here, which is like the 0, 0. Okay, all right, then now we can try to look at the order here. So you can see that for C to H, you will need to complete the other tasks before you can commence them, right? So A and B will be your starting activity because there's no activity that you need to complete before you can start A and B. So the question says that A and B start together. All right, so now from these races, then we try to draw out the 2 tasks here. So which means we have task A, okay, and then after that we have task B. So remember, we need to have our arrow here, yeah? Okay, so if you are not sure of, then you can try to use a pencil to draw it first, then later you can try to erase on and off. Okay, all right, so now we try to follow the sequence. Okay, so the next one, activities C and D can both commence when A is completed. All right, so which means that so A comes before C and D. When A completed, you can start activity C and D. So that's why in this case, then which means that this will be our checkpoint. All right, that we completed A already. Then once A completed, then we can start C and D. So we have C, all right, and also D. Okay, then now continue. So you already draw this 4, right? So you can try to put a tick there. Okay, so we continue. So activities F and E can both commence provided B and D have finished. All right, so that's why, which means that when B and D finish, then you can start E and F. So which means that these 2 edges, they must meet at the same checkpoint. Am I right? Because you are saying that EF finish, BD finish, then you can start EF. So now you need to do some arrangement here. So what I'll try to do is I'll just try to make this length longer, right? Okay, then now I reach this checkpoint. So this is the checkpoint where B and D is completed. So now I will start to do my E and F. So E and F can both commence once B and D have finished. So E and F here. Okay, so E and F settle. So now let's move on to the next one. So G can commence provided C and F are both completed. Alright, so you can see that now the thing is getting like much more complicated here because C and F both completed. So which means that you will need to look at your E here then, because I mean you doesn't want to do your checkpoint here, then later you have your E, then you have no way to go, right? So that's why in this case, what will be easier? Let's try to change the order here. So whether you write E and F or F and E, it's just the same thing, right? So F and E. So this is how you can combine C and F together. So once C and F completed, so we need to prolong this one. So C and F completed, then you can start G. So checkpoint. C and F completed, then we start our G. Alright, so H can commence provided E and G are both completed. So E and G here, so that's why I need to prolong my E again. So my E here. Alright, so this will be the checkpoint where E and G completed. Alright, then now I can commence H. Okay, so now you can realize that there's H is none of the immediate predecessor for anything, right? So that's why H will be the end lah. So normally how do you check is that you check which is the one that you did not draw your checkpoint first. I mean do not have any checkpoint yet, then which means those will be your last activity. Then after that, the same thing, this is the checkpoint where we finish all the network already. Alright, so this will be our project network here. So of course you might want to draw it, it will be depending on you whether you like to use a ruler to draw it or you want to draw it by a curve. So they are just the same. The idea here is just make sure that your flow is correct. I mean, which activity come before which one, then which activity comes after. Okay, so after you have having this project network, then now is the time that we need to write down the duration lor. So it will be easier that we try to do like that, so you doesn't need to, I mean, deal with a lot of information at one time. So you try to write down all, I mean, the sequence first, then after you have the whole project, then only you write down the time. Alright, so A7, B9, C8, D3, E7. Alright, you might want to change it a little bit in the middle here. So E7, and then after that we have F4, and then G5, and then H3. Alright, so this will be your whole project network. So after you finish, then make sure that you're having those nodes and then you have arrow. Because if let's say you didn't draw your arrow, right, then this can be your starting vertex as well. Then we go backward also, right? So that's why make sure that you must be having the arrow then to tell people that how your project works. Alright, so now let's look at example 2. Alright, question 2. Construct a network for a project consisting of activities A to I listed below. Alright, so same thing, we need to construct our project network here. Okay, so remember, immediate predecessor meaning what has to be done before you commence the relative activity. So it means that A must be done before B is carried out, A must be done before C is carried out, B has to be done before D is carrying out. Alright, so same thing, we will start with the node with the vertices that which is where we start. Alright, so our first checkpoint. Okay, so now we will continue. So you can see that A is the only task that without any immediate predecessor. So that's why you know that A will be the first task, which means that there's none of the tasks that need to completed before A. Am I right? So that's why A will be the first one. Alright, so the H, remember the arrow, the direction, and then A. Okay, so now continue. So after A finish, so you can now proceed with B and C. So B comes after A, right? So C comes after A as well. So that's why after A completed, now you can start simultaneously task B and also task C. Okay, so continue. So now we have drawn A, B, C. Okay, so D and E can start after B is completed. Alright, so D and E start simultaneously after B as well. So that's why we have our checkpoint B here. Okay, then after that we can continue with D and also E. Okay, so now D and E finish. Okay, so F comes after C. So after C completed, you can proceed with F. So that's why we have a checkpoint here. Then after that, you can proceed with F. Alright, okay, so after D, you can proceed with G. After D, we can proceed with G. And continue. After H, we can proceed E. So after H, after E, you can proceed H. So after E, then this is the checkpoint for the completion of E. Then after that, we can do H now. Alright, so the question says that you can start I once your FGH complete. So your FGH is here. Okay, so that's why we need to change the direction of the arrow here. So try to prolong your arrow as well. Okay, so we have G, alright, and then I, and then we have this one, just now, which one? Yeah, it's F. Alright, okay, so GH and F, after FGH completed, now you can carry out I. So that's why we have the last node here, which is I to be carrying out. Okay, so after I, there's no more, right? Then you have everything is connected already except the I here. So that's why this will be your ending vertices. So, alright, so just like that, after you get this thing completed, then now let's try to write down our duration here. So 3D1, E5, F7, G3, HI, and then I3. All right. Alright, so another example here before we move on to the next part. Okay, so now we have activities A to J and we need to construct a network. Okay, so here, right, I want to give you some tips here is that always make sure that when you are drawing it, you are drawing a checkpoint together with an edge. So after you draw the edge, you don't draw the next checkpoint first until you know where is your next sequence. Okay, so let me try to explain it like this. Okay, for example, I know that I can see that task A has no immediate predecessor, am I right? So that's why I'll know that I will start with task A. So task A is my starting activities. So when I draw task A, then I know that I need to draw a checkpoint to indicate that this is the end for the previous activity. Of course, when we talk about the first one, you do not have the previous lah. Okay, so this is the checkpoint where you can start task A. So that's why I will draw the checkpoint. Then after that, I'll continue with the edges. Then I know that I can start task A now. Alright, so after you have completed this age, then don't draw the other checkpoint first because you doesn't know how things work after that and to not make you confused as well. Okay, so now only you continue. So you can see that what is the next task that you can start after you complete task A. So you can see that both task B, so I finished this already. So both task B and also task F, they are having the immediate predecessor of A. So which means that I know that A and so B and F will start after A. Okay, so since B and F starts after A, which means that I must make sure that A completed first, right? So that's why when I try to draw B and F, then only I try to draw a checkpoint. Okay, so which means this will be my checkpoint here. So this indicates that I already finished A. Okay, and now I'll continue on with I have task B. And then I continue with the other one, which I have task F. Alright, okay, then move on. So I have C, D, and E, which having the immediate predecessor of B. So which means that after B, I can start C, D, E. Alright, so same thing. Now I know that when B completed, and now I can start C, I can start D, and I can start E. Okay, so you can realize that I didn't straight away draw my checkpoint here. So yeah, that will make you become much more confusing and you can't do it like step by steps. Alright, kids, so C, D, E comes after B, so I already finished that. Okay, so now we move on. So for F first maybe. So after F, we can proceed with G and H. So G and H both having a immediate predecessor of F. Okay, so which means now I can start G and H after F. So this is my note to indicate the completion of F. Alright, then after that I can start with my G and with my H. Okay, so now I settle this part. Okay, so the question also tell me that after E and G finish, then now I can start I. Alright, so E and G. So this is why I say you can't draw a checkpoint because in this case that you know that once G and E finish, then you can start I. So that's why G and E should share the same checkpoint. Am I right? So that's the checkpoint that you check both E and G already completed, then only you can start I. Okay, so in this case, then you might need to erase it a little bit, then prolong your line so that you can combine them together. Okay, so in this case, then you might be having something like this and then something like this that bring you to the same checkpoint, and that's the end for E and G, and now you can start I. Alright, so that's the idea here. So I completed. Okay, so next part. So J. So J can commence after DHI is completed. Alright, so same thing here. You see, we didn't draw the note here, the checkpoint yet, right? Because DHI should share the same checkpoint as well, because that checkpoint indicate the completion of these three tasks and you can start task J. Okay, so in this case, then I will need to change the location again. So this is D, so perhaps I'll try to do this. Alright, then I'll need to prolong my H as well, because once DHI finish, then I can start my G. So this is my H. Alright, then this will be end for my DHI, and that's the part where I can start task J. Okay, so now you have already completed already, right? Then now you can observe which is the one that you didn't connect to you didn't draw the checkpoint yet. So which means that you can see that everything got a continuous structure here. So the only two tasks that without the next task is C and J. Am I right? So that indicate that that will be your ending activities. So in this case, what do you want to do in the last step? So you just connect this to the end. All right, so this is your C just now, right? So which means C and J is your last activity. So once C and J completed, there's no furthermore task after that. So which means this will be your last checkpoint, which indicate the completion for your whole project here. All right, so after we finish everything, then please always try to check whether you have put in everything lah. So A to J, you have everything already. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. So you have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, then now we can put in the duration A 7, B 4, C 10, D 3, E 4, F 6, G 3, H 7, I 5, and J 4. Alright, so that's the idea. So I hope that you can try to practice it. Then, after doing sometimes it should be quite easy to you already. So the idea here is remember you don't draw the braces together with your edges. So you draw vertices, then after that edges. So every time after you indicate one task, then you just stop at the edges here. Then only when you know what is the next step for your task, then only you put down the checkpoint. All right, so that's the part for constructing the network, and now we'll be looking at the last part for project network. All right, so here comes the last part for project network, which we talk about dummy activities. So sometimes a dummy link needs to be added to a network to maintain the precedence structure of your network. So a dummy link has 0 time. So also you can remember it as the dummy activities because when we try to draw a link or we try to draw an edge, we are representing the task. Am I right? So that's why the activities that you are labeling or the activities that you are represented by this dummy link is called as dummy activities. Okay, so this dummy link has 0 time and is shown as a directed edge with dotted line. All right. So now you might have a question that, why do we need this thing, right? Because in a previous example, everything that we try to draw, it seems like we can try to draw like a perfect network. So it doesn't need this like, a very weird thing. Okay, so now we try to look at this situation that you understand it better. Okay, so in some cases, right, we might be having this logical difficulty in the precedence structure of our network. I'm very sorry because I'm back to my hometown, so that's why yeah, I couldn't get a very quiet place for the recording so you can see all the noise. I hope that didn't hear that very obviously, like all the motorcycle noise and so on. Okay, yeah, apologize for that. Okay, so we need to use this dummy link to ensure the logic of the network is maintained. Okay, so let's try to understand it by construct the network by using this activity table. Okay, so you can see that activity A and B has no immediate predecessor, so that's going to be where we start this project. Okay, so same thing. So this is the starting checkpoint. Okay, so once you start, then you can commence A and B. All right, so now move on. Okay, so C can commence after A and B is completed. Am I right? So I'm going to, change the ages slightly. So it will become like once I complete A and B, then I will be able to commence C. Okay, so far nothing wrong, right? Everything is good. Okay, so when we move on, then you can see that activity D can commence after B. So what is the problem here? So activity D commence after B, so which means that after B, the checkpoint is here. So maybe I will want to draw it here. Okay, so can you recognize the problem here? So C commence after both A and B completed, which is correct because the immediate predecessor for C is A and B. But then D can start straight after B is completed. So which means that You doesn't need to wait for A to be completed so that you can commence D. But then when you try to draw it like this, which means that this checkpoint must indicate the ending for A and B, then only you can commence both C and A, which logically, when you try to compare to the activity table here, this is not right. Am I right? Because you doesn't like what I say lah. A B doesn't need to be completed so that you can commence D. Once B completed, you can do your D already. So which means in this case, how should we draw that? Okay, maybe you can draw it below. So this is like the wrong. So this is like the case where you can't draw it lah. Alright, so now we will be introducing one link which is called as the dummy link. Okay, so you realize that B is the one that so-called like creating the problem here, because once B finished, then you can start D. But after A and B finish, then only you can start C. So now what we try to do is we don't straight away combine them together, because you know that B can, once B finish, you can start D already, right? So that's why starting phrases. Okay, so now we will be having one link that tell us A. Then after that, you have another link that tell us B. Okay, so now what we try to do first, we try to put in the single one first. Okay, so imagine that if let's say A didn't complete first and B complete first lah. Alright, so once B completed, you can commence D. So that's why this is the part where I can commence D already. Okay, so far I didn't draw my C yet and everything is still fine because I'm still following the logicality here. Okay, but now the problem is that once you put a checkpoint here, then you cannot combine A together because you doesn't need A to complete it to start D. So now we will put this dummy link here. So this will be the checkpoint that indicate the end for A and B, and now you can start C. Okay, but how do you show the direction of it? So this is the place that we will try to put this dotted line edge. Okay, so as what mentioned, so this dummy link has 0 time. So which means that when you try to put in time here, there will be no number that you can try to put here. Reason being is this is just like a additional link, like it is called as a dummy link, so-called. So it is just to indicate to you that after B finish and after A finish, then now you can commence C. And then after B finish, then you can commence D already. So this is 0 time because you know that if let's say you spend 7 minutes here, actually you didn't spend anything here, right? This is just a direction for me to know that, I need to complete B also so that I can start C. So that's why at this time is 0. So that's why it indicate the same thing where you need 7 minutes in B, then only you can start D. So you need 7 minutes in B, then only you can start C. So that's why this is what is that meant by the dummy link has 0 time. Alright, so this is in a place where you have a logical difficulty in your precedent structure. Okay, I hope that you can get the idea. And then when you are doing your exercise, you will have one example like this as well. Alright, so that's basically for today's lesson. So I think for today's one, it's going to be slightly easy because constructing network isn't that hard. So I hope that when you try to do your exercise in your textbook, right, make sure that you try to go through again how to find out your critical path, your minimum completion time, LST, AST, and also the flirt time. Alright, and if there's any question, then I will see you in next week consultation hour. Alright, thank you.